Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. We're back at the clutter zone, otherwise known as my model bench. And we're working on part 6 of our 2Ts by AMT. We've got our hot rod, and we've got our classic Model T right here, which is going to be a pickup truck. And we have a couple items still to fabricate, and then hopefully we're going to be going on to final assembly here. The hot rod requires a fuel cell to go underneath the seat, and I'm thinking probably a battery box and tray to go underneath. Needs its headlights, the windshield, and a couple other details. Oh, steering wheel would be handy too. Of course, our classic T requires a little bit more final assembly, and one of the things it does need, that I'm hopefully going to be doing very soon, is the installation of spark plug wires. And before we can do that, the body and cowl needs to be cemented onto the frame, because the wiring for the spark plugs actually goes from the cowl down to the engine. So before we can do the spark plug wires, the body has to go onto the floor pan and onto the chassis first. But there is a laundry list of things that need to be done before that happens. First of all, it makes more sense to drill the holes for the spark plug wires in the engine and the cowl before we actually bring them together. And as well as that, there's still a gap in our exhaust system that I need to plug from when I stretch the frame. Instrument panel needs to go in place, a dashboard. As well as that, the brake lever needs to go and somewhere. Anyway, the pedals need to be installed as well into the interior. Once we bring all that together, then we can install the body and floor pan onto the chassis, and then we can put those all important wires in. Exhaust pipe plugged. Exhaust pipe touched up. Pedals and brake lever installed. And the brake lever and the pedals are painted. And the dashboard has been installed. Now on a Model T, the spark plug wires go to terminals that are located on the firewall. And that would be these four right here now. They were actually kind of came to a point, and there's no way I'm going to be able to attach the wires to those. So I filed them a little bit to turn them into more like flat stumps. Now I've got a fighting chance of actually drilling a hole. This is one of these don't do it this way type of moments. This is a poor man's way of drilling a small hole, is to use the end of a number 11 X-Acto knife blade. It works, but for better results, get yourself a pin vise, and I know I've got one somewhere, I just can't find it, and a drill bit that's the same diameter as the wire you're going to be using, and that'll give you a nice cylindrical hole that will grab the wire a whole lot better than this will. But like I said, I don't have mine handy, so this is what I'm doing. So there we are, drilling the holes basically in the top of the spark plugs. This whole little tower thing you see here, if you actually look at a picture of a real Model T, these are supposed to represent the portion of the spark plugs that stand out, and the wires actually hook onto the end. But at any rate, we've drilled a little divot in the top of each one that we'll be able to hopefully snag our spark plug wire in and get that wiring in place. Okay, look, I'm picking it up by the cab and the rest of it staying with it. Progress has been made. The cab is obviously glued onto the underframe, and the chassis has been glued onto it. So now I can finally get these spark plug wires in. We all know how much I enjoy doing those. Alright, that's those spark plug wires in. Fortunately, there's only 4. But as you can see, they go from the top of the engine directly to the firewall. And you know what? I think I might leave them gray, because I've seen quite a few pictures of these early Model T wires, and they seem to be kind of a light gray, kind of an ash color. And they certainly show up better than if I paint them black, at which point they'll completely disappear. So here's our hot rod dashboard with the dry brushing done on the instruments. And there it is with the chrome surround put on. So I think the dry brushing turned out pretty good. So now that this is glued together, it can go into the hot rod. There's the dashboard glued in place. It's a little bit more of a relaxed angle than I originally wanted, but really that's the way the parts want to go together, and sometimes you just kind of go with it. I'm just looking at this chrome surround right now, and I'm thinking, here as I change the angle, and it catches the light, which it's not going to do now. There we go. Imagine that on a bright summer day. It could blind you. And this basic tray is going to become the fuel tank for the hot rod. I'm not going to worry about the upper part because it's going to be up against the underside. No point in gluing a piece of styrene in there. I will be sanding this down so it's kind of roundish and putting some straps on it where it would be held on to the underside. And then I'm going to be running a fuel filler to kind of come up into that turtle back as I mentioned earlier. Now I've glued on some very thin sheet styrene. The middle is going to be where the fuel line comes out of, and these other two bumps there are basically reinforcing areas. Once that glue dries fully, I'm going to sand it down in order to make it look like it's been stamped out of sheet metal. And there's our fuel cell detailed up. It still requires painting, obviously, but I'm actually going to do that after I mount it to the car, because I still have to put the fuel filler neck on there. So now I've glued the fuel tank onto the frame. And this little white box here, I have no idea what the steering gear should look like, but that's basically where it's got to be located. And then there's a drag link that'll go from here up to the front wheels, and I will use the kit part for that. But basically the kit gives you nothing for a steering box or anything like that. There's our steering wheel and column installed. Steering column was pre-painted semi-gloss black, and the steering wheel is going to be painted probably a flat black with the center areas being silver. I've added about a ½ inch of length to the exhaust pipe, and I hollowed out the end of it, as you can see there. Now, one of the things that's been bothering me is really almost 50% of the pickup truck bed just floats off the end completely unsupported. Now, AMT does give you these little horns that stick back maybe a quarter of an inch. What I've done is I've built up a set of frame rails. I'll give them a coat of semi-gloss black, and I think that'll make the whole thing look a lot more probable. Alright, while preparing the headlights for the Classic T, I discovered a bit of a problem. Now, the headlights are glued in. They're in there with a little bit of white glue, and that will turn transparent over time. But boy, it's difficult to tell, but those lenses really sit deep in the headlight buckets, almost a third of the way back. So it remains to be seen what the hot rod ones will look like when I put those together. Alright, there's the headlight lenses installed in the hot rod buckets, and they're pretty undersized too, at least to my eye. Certainly it seems like they're kind of lost in comparison to the rest of the headlight, but we'll put them on and we'll see what they look like. Now, using some sprue and a candle for shaping, I made the fuel filler neck here. And the idea is in order to refuel the hot rod, they'd simply open up the little turtleneck hatch at the back. Right there. They'd open up that and then they could refuel it. There's our fuel cell all painted up. I used Testor's aluminum, Testor steel, and some Humbrol gunmetal for the straps. Okay, that little white bit you see coming down on the underside, that is the end of the steering column, and it goes right onto part of the steering linkage right there. So I did not paint the end, mainly so that I'd have a handle when I was painting the entire steering column, and I knew I was going to have to be gluing it. But I knew in advance I was easily going to be able to get in there with a brush and touch that up. Well, we finally have some eyes on our Classic T. Unfortunately, the left-hand headlight is not all that I would like it to be. While touching up the black paint, to make up for the fact that the lens sits in so deep, capillary reaction ended up drawing some of the paint into the lens. So I had to pop it all apart, scrape it, reassemble it, and in doing so, it's not quite vertical, and there's still a couple little spots in there. That's one of these cases where I suspect if I pop it apart and redo it again, it's probably only going to get worse. So, cringe. It's going to have to stay the way it is. Now, something I've been contemplating is the metal front axle that is included with the kit. And basically, from here to here, it should not be there. the front end of this should look a lot lacier than it does. So I know it's going to mean sacrificing front wheels that roll, but I'm not planning on playing with this. So I'm going to take the front axle out and I'm going to chop it so that you can't see this middle portion here. Yeah, so even if it results in non-rolling front wheels, I think it was worth it to bob the middle part of the axle. Gives the front end a much more airy look, which is what the real thing has. Alright, I just did a couple of really fidgety and frustrating things on the hot rod while the camera was off. The headlights have been glued on, and they have very few or very small contact points. And I finally managed to get the drag link in, going from the steering gear to the steering box, and that was not easy. I am going to have to cut a very small notch off the side of the body to clear this. I'm just about to do that. But at least it's plausible that this thing can drive now. There you can see the notch I cut out of the front of the body. So now the steering gear actually goes where it's supposed to go. Alright, this is the windshield frame for the hot rod. Oddly enough, it didn't come chromed, but that's okay. This royal blue looks good. However, my plan was I'll just glue a stick onto the corner of it so I can get it painted. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I'll glue that onto the bottom corner, and that's going to be scraped and glued anyway when I put it on the hot rod. Except, this is the bottom. That's the top. So I got a little bit of touching up to do when I'm done. Now this little guy here is going to be the battery, and as I said, that's actually going to be located under the turtle back. Now we're only ever going to see it from underneath, so I don't have to worry about putting any terminals or anything like that on the top. So this is what we're going to see from underneath when we look up inside. So close, yet so far. I guess I better go to bed. Maybe I'll finish this up tomorrow. Okay, back at it. Took a 2-hour nap, worked for 8 hours. Started making a birthday cake for one of the kids. Let's see if we can wrap this puppy up. Let's see. Got to put a roof on that. Paint the rad hose. Need to mount the body on the hot rod. Let's get going. Here I am just gluing the movable windshield panels into the frame here. I'm trying to get the angle the same, otherwise it's going to drive me crazy for the rest of my days. I will be making a new windshield for the Classic T, because as you can see, windshield really doesn't fit in the frame, and it's awfully thick. So I have some thin, transparent styrene I'm going to cut to size, and I'm going to white glue in place. Alright, there is our windshield glass in the Classic T. And if I turn it on side, you can see that it doesn't sit proud as the kit part did. So I think that looks quite a bit better. And that's just held in with a little bit of carpenter's glue. And that has the advantage that if you get a little bit on the transparency, it generally will set clear. Alright, now the gear shift is a loose fit in the hole. As a matter of fact, there's a pin that's supposed to go into the top of the transmission, and I don't think I'm going to be able to show that exactly. Now, none of this is lining up perfectly, and I'm not going to be able to have this piece here, which is supposed to represent the boot. It's going to be a loose fit as well. So what I'm planning on doing, and I'm doing right now, so I've put a big plug of white glue on the end here. So I'll smush that into the floor, and when the white glue dries, it will hopefully end up representing the boot that goes around the base. Okay, actually that went in pretty good. Let's see, you can just see a little bit of the white glue there behind the steering wheel. This is a good shot of the inside of the car, showing the gear shift going down into the floor, and you can see how the white glue kind of smushes up in and around it. I'm going to touch that up with a little bit of, to me, a German gray, so that it looks like a rubber boot that goes down onto the floor. And you can see the extreme angle I've had to place the car at to get that gear shift to stay where I want it to until the white glue sets up. Okay, hopefully we can see past the glare from the dashboard, but you can see that the boot at the bottom of the gear shift has been painted German gray. Now in this shot you can see the big long bars. Now those are intended to go from the headlight brackets to the windshield to make sure that it doesn't vibrate too much, I guess. Now those are some pretty massive pieces. I'm actually going to be using these brass rods, and the loop that I've got here might be a little more crude than what AMT had, but I think overall the appearance will be a lot better having a fine bracing rod. As you can see here, I've glued the windshield frame on, as well as those two braces. Now I haven't painted them yet. I'm debating whether to paint them silver or dark blue like the window frame is. I think I'm probably going to live with it for just an hour or so and make a decision. There is not a whole lot holding that windshield frame on. I was extremely concerned about it being knocked off. The funny thing is putting these flimsy little braces on makes everything incredibly rigid. Now if you look, these braces take a very small bend there and there. Well, this is a very minor bend. This is a bit wider to clear the generator. Not much I could do about that, and I don't know if that's a problem stemming from the way I put things together, or this was another AMT mistake. But really, this is nothing more than a brace anyway. So I can see the real thing having a slight bend in it before it gets down to the headlight buckets. Now here's the ends of our headers. The one on the left I've drilled out and filed as thin as I dare. And of course the one on the right I haven't done yet. Now it's true I'm going to have to touch that up with a little bit of silver, but I think it's worth it because, I mean, the big wide open pipe is, a trademark of this type of car. I almost forgot something for the Classic T. We have the starter handle. Certainly would have been silly if I had forgotten that. Well, we're really on the home stretch now. It's time to put the headers on. I think, since it's not a really tight precision fit, maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some contact cement. I'll put the contact cement on this part, then I'll jab it onto the engine to apply the contact cement to the engine, and then I'll let it set the way it should, and then I'll reintroduce the parts. We'll try that, see how it works. And that's our headers glued on. Now right now they just have contact cement on them, but I'm probably going to put a little bit of super glue in there just to stiffen things up. Alright, so silver for the bracing ended up winning out over the blue. And of course our headers are now firmly attached. And I think it's about time to take these over to the other table, get some bright light on them, and show them off. So there they are, completed. Although I think most everybody has a little list of things they still want to do to a model after it's completed and probably never get around to. I know I usually do. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to call these guys done. Was it an easy kit? No. Mainly because you have so many options, and I rather suspect that parts of these kits find their way into some other AMT kits as well. So the fenders on the hot rod were especially challenging to get those to work out right. And then of course we had the unexpected wheelbase problem with the pickup truck. That certainly threw us for a bit of a loop. But pretty much if I was going to build this sort of a hot rod in real life, this is probably what I'd build. It wouldn't have huge drag slicks on the back. It would just be something for cruising up and down the main drag. And let's get the hood off of the Classic T so we can take a look at the engine. The only additional detailing that was done on the Classic T was just those spark plug wires. But really, there's not a heck of a lot more under the hood than what you see here, because I did do quite a bit of research. And of course, there's our wooden bed. Now let's flip these guys over. And here's the underside. And you can see the fuel tank I added. And tucked up there, you can just see the battery. Now, I was at one point thinking of putting a bunch of extra wiring down there, and, well, gosh darn it, I got a little lazy in the end. Because after all, other than me, this is probably the last time these are going to be seen from the underside. And something as well that I was going to do, and still might do in the future, is I might rust up this pipe a little bit more. As you can see, it's rusty as it comes from the engine. Hard to believe these are allegedly the same sort of car. I did go out of my comfort zone a little bit with these by doing the spark plug wires. And of course, now that I've already done it on 2 vehicles, I'll, probably do it on any future vehicles. Either that, or maybe I'll just build diesels. Oh, there's a thought, isn't it? At any rate, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and until next time, keep on modeling.